This is how I see it. Jason Arday was killed in effect by a lynch mob that had it in for him. And they all had their own different reasons. Some of the people who had it in for him, the Kathleen Stocks and the David Starkeys of this world, they were, or they are, bitter ex-academics. These are bitter and resentful people who couldn't wait to bring him down. There were other people, writers for The Spectator. I'm not going to name names, but The Spectator, The Mail, The Telegraph, Sarah Vine in the Daily Mail, GB News, no doubt The Heretic of the New Culture Forum and Talk TV. They were enjoying it. They were kind of monetizing his destruction. In effect, monetizing his death. And where are they all now? They've all scuttled away like little rats. And the ones that have scuttled away like little rats, well, you can understand that. I would describe these people, and it's not a word I'm using lightly, particularly people like David Starkey and can't mention any more names. I would describe them as evil. I really would. But that's just my opinion. You may be a little bit more sympathetic to their cause. So the ones that haven't gone into hiding, that have reared their heads, people like Sarah Vine in the Daily Mail, are perverting the reality by blaming Cambridge University for his death. By saying, in effect, that Cambridge University caused his death by over-promoting him, putting him in the spotlight. Nothing to do with the media coverage, nothing to do with dissecting his CV and claiming that basically because he was promoted because he was black, and that his CV didn't ring true altogether. But this is a question for Cambridge University and him. It doesn't have to be for public discussion necessarily. It's only for public discussion if the whole thing has been politicized because of his colour. It's a complete perversion which illustrates the depths to which we have fallen. I mean, it is a Shakespearean fall from grace, human society in the last 20 years. And it's got to the point now where this revolution in decency, this post-truth, post-human, facile existence cannot be reclaimed by that small pocket of people who can see it happening. Now, I actually think that wokeness is a fabrication of the right, but I know that's not a popular opinion. So I kind of think that the whole thing is just a smokescreen for old ideas about women being in the home, racism, anti-feminism, anti-homosexuality, just as it was 30 years ago plus, where homosexuals and minorities were excluded, they were beaten, they were bullied, they were sidelined, and that's a matter of public record, a matter of public shame. For some reason, social media, the tech oligarchs, right-wing politicians have hijacked the sense that we were progressing and have decided to turn the clocks back. Because they're immune, of course, from the horrors that will come about. It's a pathetic excuse that the university was responsible because they over-promoted him, put him in the spotlight. It's up to Cambridge University who they promote and who they don't promote. And we'll come to this whole idea of him being over-promoted. Has Sarah Vine, maybe she was over-promoted due to her marriage to Michael Gove. But if anything happened to Sarah Vine of the Daily Mail, would we blame the Daily Mail for over-promoting her, even though clearly she's there on the basis of the fact that she knows the right kind of people? Not really based on talent, is it? Richard Tice, the numbskull of British politics, has he been over-promoted? Farage, the grifter, who's pocketed tens of millions from his sort of political charlatanism and his grifting, has he been over-promoted? There's all sorts of people who've been over-promoted. But the rabid dogs don't tear Richard Tice or Nigel Farage apart, do they, in the same way? Do you remember when Caroline Flack died? She was the presenter of Love Island, I think. Well, there was a trial. She hung herself. The blame in the court at her inquest was primarily directed at the British tabloid media and social media trolls. Just like I am directing the blame for the death of Jason Arday at the British right-wing tabloid media, certain embittered academics who appear on podcasts and attack the man from all sorts of angles, complaining about diversity and inequality legislation. The coroner said to Caroline Flack's inquest that her mental health had so deteriorated due to the intense distress of the relentless press coverage. So seeing these rats defend themselves by saying that Cambridge University should not have over-promoted him and put him in that position. How many people can you think of? Some of these questionable presenters and writers, particularly in the right-wing press. How many of them can you think really have been over-promoted? So it wasn't necessarily one person, of course, who we can identify as the killer. The question is really about responsibility, inculpability, causality, the consequence of this sustained campaign by what I consider to be evil, vindictive, embittered political opportunists and people like Catherine Stock and David Starkey, who are particularly resentful. Whatever the legitimate questions were about his academic record or his career or Cambridge's appointment process, these are in effect matters between Arday and his employer or institution. They do not inherently constitute a matter of national political controversy unless certain people have decided they're going to make something out of it for two reasons. One, because it suits the agenda. This idea that wokeness is out of control because they equate wokeness with power and they equate wokeness with political expediency and opportunity, but also because they're monetizing, that all the media is monetized now. And it's a great way of stirring up that hysteria amongst their audiences. They decided to turn it into a culture war narrative. Now, as I said, I don't believe in the culture war. I don't believe in wokeness. I think these are figments of the imagination. And the implication was that he'd been over-promoted. But that's a political construction. That's a construction, that's an abstract idea that they've decided upon themselves. There's no objective measure on how much or how far a person is to be promoted. There's no measurement for that. People are promoted, if you like, or given responsibilities or opportunities for all sorts of different reasons. They're talking about it as though it's an established fact. And in order to provide the evidence for that fact, they've decided to go over his background with a fine-tooth comb to see whether or not they can ridicule and humiliate him further. But as I said, most of the people who I have to listen to every day as part of my job have clearly been over-promoted. These are people who should be estate agents. They shouldn't really be fronting national TV programmes on GB News. I mean, anyway, let's not go down that route. I think there's a hypocrisy in this accusation. Anybody can be described as being over-promoted. Well, I'm not arguing that there are no legitimate questions about his thesis, perhaps, his employment, his academic record, and these questions have by and large been investigated. It's when these questions are politicized and racialized for monetary and political opportunism, and political gain and monetary gain by some people who themselves have clearly been over-promoted. There's a fundamental difference between investigating whether a university made a sound appointment and turning the individual concerned into a symbol of everything one dislikes about modern Britain, or wokeness as they call it. It's public persecution. In your lifetime, minorities and gay people have been openly excluded, bullied, beaten and marginalised. This was not an imaginary problem. This was real. And Jason Arday was one of the people who had that as part of a central part of his work. We've created this really deeply unpleasant atmosphere from which we can't elevate ourselves for all the reasons I've talked about in the last 150 videos. And these things are amplified. We turned what could have been a professional dispute into a cultural spectacle. And none of those who are responsible will ever admit that they have fallen into a kind of cesspit